Welcome to the AAGD Spotlight Live, where we take one of our members and we spotlight them for a whole month. Let me grab Cameron real quick. Let's get him.
He's invited. Hey, Cam. Don't be afraid. Everybody who's watching, don't be afraid to add your questions. Hey, Cam, how's it going?
Hey, what's going on?
Nothing much. So let me do this little intro real quick, and then I'll start grilling you about about your experience. So Cameron T. Moore is a multi-hyphenate, polymath, graphic designer. He is a podcaster, a DJ, a all sorts of cool things. And I know that your title on LinkedIn says employer brand and recruitment marketing program manager.
Oh
So
yeah,
I'm
it's a lot of
super
words.
excited.
It's
It's
a
a lot
lot
of
of
work.
words.
I'm super excited to ask about that.
Yeah, it's just a lot of words to say I do propaganda for a corporate company.
So, Cam, how would you describe yourself?
Um, I am a multi-hyphenated creative. It's the best way to put it. More just because I have creative ADD and I get bored very easily. So I just learned a lot of different things. And as I learn those things, I kind of add it to the repertoire.
Hmm.
And so that's why it seems like I do a lot of things, which is completely true. But it really is because I get kind of bored sometimes. And a lot of times I just want to learn things. So, um, and I am a little bit older than I look. So I have extra years behind me to kind of put some time into a lot of these things.
Gotcha.
But it's been really, really fun. And so that's usually why when people ask me, they're like, so what do you do? And it's more about like, what am I doing now? Not what I do as as a thing
Okay,
all the
very
time.
cool. Um, I definitely want to get into later on about how you balance all of those things and the patience that it takes to build something and to really see the fruits of your labor because I struggle with getting bored creatively and I struggle with if I did something I want to see the creative fruits like right now. But first, before we get into that, I would love to hear about how you got started. Whenever some people start from when they were little and they were holding a crayon, some people start with when they graduated college, but I would love to hear how you got started as a creative.
Um, so actually, I got started as a creative in terms of like getting into like drawing and those types of things. Was two reasons. One, I've been reading comic books since I was 3 or 4. I'd say 3 or 4 since I've been learning how to read. And so before that, I was just looking at the pictures. And then two, I actually I saw the music video "Take on Me" by Aha, and it's like half animation, half real thing. So like I was like, I want to do that. And so that was actually a really cool thing. It was really fun, and like that's something that I was like, oh, I kind of wanted to learn like the art part and the animation part, and then me and my parents and all that stuff. We've always they've really been encouraging of us to be into the creative arts and those types of things. So in terms of just in high school and even in college, so I went to school for animation illustration, got a Bachelor of Fine Arts at San Jose State University. Shout out to the Spartans. But in the Shrunken Headman. So when I went to school, it was basically learning how to do everything but classical painting and drawing. So I learned how to pastels and oils and acrylics and those types of things. But we were basically gearing ourselves to be more into the entertainment industry. So storyboard artists, concept artists, those types of things. However, the skills that we've learned kind of transfer into pretty much any creative field. And so, we did figure drawing, we did like, color theories and lights and shadows and compositions and those types of things. And also while I was there, I was learning design as well. So I was getting a lot of good educations in graphic design and in illustration and that kind of thing. And so, and as you can tell, I kind of do a lot of different things. So on top of just learning art and those types of things, I was able to use like those skills in different areas. And so I've been was a street dancer for a very long time, and at that time I was in a dance company, and so that allowed me to another avenue to kind of like use creativity. So as you can tell, I do a lot of creative stuff all the time. um, but for me, it really is more about just like yeah, being able to express yourself in just different types of venues. And so one of the things I just really didn't want to do was like I didn't want to only be a designer or only be an illustrator or only be a dancer, but I wanted to be a little bit. The good thing about that is I'm a jack of all trades and I'm a master of some. The bad thing is I'm never great at one specific thing, and I'm never like an actual master. And I think that for me is one thing where I was kind of like, I know a lot of people kind of strive for like this big greatness and want to be a masters of things and that kind of stuff. But I think for me, I would get bored if I was just a master of one discipline. And that's the only thing I did. It's the only thing I talked about. And so I actually enjoyed learning a lot from a lot of different people and a lot of different things. So my journey did really kind of like get a little bit more solidified when I was in college. And part of our illustration group was called the Shrunken Headman. A lot of my former classmates all work in like they've done basically all the games and movies that everyone likes. That's the home. Some farm of our homies have done something like that. Everything from God of War on PlayStation to a lot of the MCU movies and that kind of stuff. So it's really fun to see my classmates and my friends have done, with our creative aspects. And so I took my talents from California, went to New York, and so I learned from a lot of different interesting people, and I got my start more in New York. I was doing stuff at an animation studio for a little while when I learned I didn't want to do animation anymore. But I'm glad I did that because I actually got to go through the process of it. I used to work at a hip hop magazine called the Av, that where I got to do a lot of design layouts. So it was like magazine designs and like article layouts and that kind of stuff, which I really miss because like that's actually a fun thing to do as a designer to get like, hey, here's a bunch of words, here's some images, have fun. And so that was a really good creative challenge. And I met a lot of interesting people through that have helped me out all the time. I've been in New York. I'm based in New York now. And so with that, I've kind of bounced around a lot of different things. But since I was in school and I was a generalist, that actually kind of helped me in New York City because I was able to really kind of change my jobs whenever I kind of needed to and kind of adapt to this current situation. And as a creative, as a freelancer, you kind of have to be adaptable. And so New York allowed me to with that adaptability where, I was I was designing sometimes, and sometimes I was over here doing illustrations, and then I kind of got into web development for a little while. So I was a front-end web developer for a number of years as well, on top of being a web designer as well. So it just kind of like I just liked being in areas where I can like learn new things and like use that creativity and then just creatively just solve creative problems, like creatively solve problems essentially.
Gotcha. So what would you say is I like the mug. I like that the mug has the name of your podcast on it. I
Oh,
love
nice.
that.
Product
Um,
placement.
product placement, self-promotion, yeah. So what would you say was the sort of the guiding principle as you chose to go from these different positions? Like what made you want to pursue this job? What do you think helped you get that foot in the door for that job?
I think honestly, being a good person helped a lot because a lot of it was, a lot of the jobs I've gotten, there's only one, I would say the only job I got from just almost like a cold call type of situation was at Marvel. That was literally, I actually applied, did the whole interview process and got in that way. But the majority of my jobs have been from knowing someone that, hey, this person, my job at BET, I had recently gotten laid off from a startup job, and my friend was like, "Hey, they're looking for designers at BET for social media," and that literally was a tweet. And then
Wow.
that from that tweet, that conversation happened, and I got hired as a designer. So I think for me, it's usually more like, oh, that would be a cool place to work at, or that would be a fun thing to do, or that aspect of it. And I think that part is good. The bad part is when I do get bored, or if I do, get unfulfilled, then
Mhm.
my attitude might change, like reflect that.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
so yeah, I've been fired a few times.
Wow.
Sometimes justified, sometimes not. But I think a lot of it kind of comes to that where it comes back down to that level of why are you there in the first place? And I think when I'm at a place where I can really thrive is when I have like interesting problems to solve and I'm learning something. And I think once that starts to go away, young Cam was very just like, oh man, I can't just like sit here and be on autopilot, which I know a lot of people can do that and they do it really well. But I know for me, I used to always just get bored or just be unengaged. And I can do my job if that's what needs to be done. But I think for me, once the fulfillment starts to go away, or if I'm not learning anything, or if I feel like we're just doing a bunch of stupid decisions or those types of things, that's when that joy kind of goes away. So I think for each of the jobs I've had, it really comes down to just being creative and learning a lot. And so I love in a space where I'm like learning and I can interestingly solve problems creatively,
Mhm.
but I'm also learning from a lot of different people because I've learned way more being in jobs because lack of personnel or someone quits or something to that effect, and I might have to fill that role, and then I just kind of thrust into a situation I don't know. I only have my skill set, and now I got to learn some new things. So that's kind of like I enjoy that kind of process because I'm always like constantly learning and kind of doing some things.
Okay, cool. So back to the beginning, we were saying your long title. What are you doing nowadays?
So now I work at Snap Inc., commonly known as Snapchat. And so I'm a, yeah, the long ass title essentially is I do recruitment marketing now in terms of, and that's more employer brand and talent brand. So that's basically like when you're looking for a job, employer brand is the person that is creating the content and setting that actual brand for you to look at that. So,
Oh,
we're the ones
okay.
that yeah, so we're the ones that basically, when you're looking up a job, you're looking at the career site, you're looking at LinkedIn, you're looking at built in, we're the ones that kind of like set those tones so that if you were trying to work at a certain place, we're the ones that would set the content, write all the copy, design all of that kind of thing. And so it's been kind of an interesting shift from what I was doing before. I was art directing,
Mhm.
and now I'm using a lot more of my skill sets in this one particular job because I'm doing a little bit of designing, doing copy editing, also, designing out presentations and those types of things and then but also working on marketing campaigns and that aspect of it to be like to highlight because I mean I work at Snapchat, it's a tech company, it's very white, it's a lot of dudes, and so for everyone that's not that, like I try to highlight those people. So there's a lot
Sure.
of amazing people that work at Snap that are doing some super interesting things. Like I learned what a thermal engineer is. One, didn't know that was a job. Two, is a black woman who is awesome, and three,
Oh,
her job basically is to make sure our brains don't melt when we wear wearable tech.
wow, that's really
And that,
cool.
exactly. So I was like, that's a story that we need to tell more often than just
Mhm.
like, hey, we have a tech billionaire as a founder, kind of a thing, you know?
Right.
Shout out to Evan. I like my job. Thanks, dude. But a lot of times we're really trying to highlight the employees and what they do, and from a more like a human aspect, and authentic too, because like every place says, oh, we're a family, or we're this, or we're that, but what are the people that actually work there say, and then do they say it authentically? Because a lot of times, there's aspects of every corporate job that sucks, but then there's also ones that are really good, and like um, again, I also have an unhealthy amount of knowledge about Snapchat, which is as an older person is really hilarious. But Snap does a lot of cool things that need to be highlighted. Like they have like 6 months maternity leave and 4 months paternity leave, and that's
Wow,
like unheard of for a lot of different companies. And like that's something that should be celebrated and people should know about it. So those are the kind of stories I like to tell. So like recruitment marketing and talent brand is a lot more about storytelling and really kind of shine a light on like actual human interest type things that are really cool.
that is really cool. That sounds like a really cool job. It sounds like it would have, because marketing is ever changing, because you have to constantly adapt the needs, since if you're working in with for recruiting basically, it sounds like you would face a lot of different challenges
Yes,
that you can sink your
100%.
teeth into.
Yeah, I can definitely use a lot of different parts of my skill sets in
Mhm.
different ways. I look at a lot more spreadsheets than I ever have in my entire life, and then also doing like slide decks and those types of things. Something that I know how to do, and I don't do as much anymore. But when I do, that's when I get to like I might design out a slide deck that's like super easy, and then when you're presenting, they're like, "Wow, this deck looks amazing. Who did it?" And my former manager would be like, Cam did. He was a designer for 20 years. They're like, oh, okay. Can you design art decks? I'm like, nah, son. That's gonna be. I'm expensive now.
Ooh, nice. So I know you touched on like comics and stuff that you saw growing up. What inspires you visually?
Um, I think in terms of visually wise, I think honestly, it's the part of it comes back from I would say from music on one
Mhm.
end. I think two is like just kind of like the story of whatever that aspect of it is. One of the things that is interesting about like the African American graphic designer guild is like the story about like how it came together. And Terrence is really good about talking about that story, but also linking everyone together and really putting that time in. And so I think creatively for me is that it's like usually my environment, my friends, the stuff that I'm consuming. I dial down on my celebrity stuff and dial up my creative stuff. So looking at other photographers and illustrators and movie people as well. And so my friend set is a very mix of all these types of disciplines. And so I would say like the overall inspiration usually comes from all the homies, honestly, because everyone's doing really interesting things that inspire me to do better. And like, I might not draw all the time, and then I hang out with some of my art friends, and I'm like, crap, I need to be drawing more. Or during the pandemic, I started to make beats and get more into music production, and I do it purely for myself. It's a creative outlet. I'm not selling it the beats. I'm not doing anything like that, and it's a fun thing endeavor to do to not monetize it and just kind of just do it. So then it really is fun to like talk to my other friends that are beat makers and like what they're working on, and that inspires me too. So I think my friends and my friend set of creative people that I have around me are probably my biggest inspiration because I'm always learning new things from them, and they're always teaching me things inadvertently or directly.
That's awesome. And it sounds like you have some really cool friends.
My
Um,
my friends are fresh.
my friends are fresh. Speaking of my friends are fresh, I really wanted to ask what inspired you. And I know also Blurred Lines talking about like black nerds talking about nerd culture and everything. What inspired you to start these
Uh,
podcasts? And I'm gonna
um,
assume part of it was that sort of like creative boredom that you have to satisfy.
Yeah, so originally when I first came to New York, in the Bay Area, I've always had a group of people around me that are creative, that I trust, that are like kind of like a council of kind of people usually. And so when I moved from the Bay Area to New York, I had to kind of like recreate that in New York with the same type of friends and that kind of mindset. And so we ended up starting a podcast called The Table of Truth with a bunch of us, and it was literally just an iPhone, press and record in a cafe talking shit. And
Nice.
that was in the era of like podcasts when it wasn't big yet. It was still kind of a new thing. And it
Mm-hmm.
was a really fun thing to do because we just sit there and talk shit about random things. And so we progressed in the while we're doing it. And I actually, as you can tell, like talk. And so doing podcasts kind of came naturally to me, and also just having good conversations with good people and that kind of stuff. And so as everyone moves on with their lives and kind of grows and stuff like that, kind of that started going into other things, and one of it was Blurred Lines, the guys that I do it with. um, Cam, I've known him since college. We're b-boys together in our b-boy crew and that kind of stuff. And then Josh and D'Angelo, I met them at BET, still talk to them on a regular basis and nerd out about everything. We just dropped the episode on Dune 2, and when they both read the books, they got really, really deep into it. And so that's just a really fun thing. And I think also it's one of those things where it's like, you know, Blurred Lines is fun because we've all been in the entertainment industry at some form or fashion as a producer or editor, or I was doing social media. Josh is the audio engineer. D'Angelo is a creative director on like spots and those types of things. So taking it from our normal just geekiness, but then also from like, yes, we've been there, we've seen the budgets, we know how it works. It's been a fun thing to kind of like really wrap our head around and really talk about. And then for my friends are fresh, it's just like I have a lot of friends that do a lot of cool shit. And it's really cool to talk to them about it and what they're doing and why they do it and that kind of stuff. And it helps me get better about hosting and really having good conversations. But it
Mm-hmm.
also always teaches me things too as well. So that's why I really like to highlight and showcase some of my friends that are doing these interesting things that like me and them talk about it all the time. But then sometimes I think it would be awesome for other people to hear those as well.
For sure. So whenever I look at sequential projects that creatives are doing, whether it's for money or it's just a passion project that they have, whether it's like a comic or a graphic novel or a podcast or a YouTube channel, I'm always curious to ask people, how do you stay consistent? How do you balance, like, I have a job that pays the bills, or a job or a business that pays the bills, but I'm also doing this project because I'm really working on that balance too with my own stuff.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a ever going balance all the time. I think the biggest thing is you have to actually have intention behind what you're working on. And I think like if the goal is just willy-nilly, I'm just doing it just to do it, that's completely fine. But like if you
Yeah.
really want to keep that consistency and that kind of thing, you have to really have an actual goal. Like what is the goal? Oh, I want to do 10 podcast episodes. Cool. That's your goal. Let's get to 10, then reevaluate and see what that goal is later. Um, excuse me. But I think it really is goes back down to the intention and actually just planning it out, because I think at the end of the day, as a we all have our 9 to 5s, and if we're lucky enough to be able to our 9 to 5 could be our passion and that's our main income, or that's awesome. But for a lot of us, that's not the case. And so if that's not the case, then how are you going to use the finite amount of time that you have to dedicate to the things that you like doing. And so I think being intentional with that time is actually the kind of the key. Because like, you know, and you really have to really like put it out like an actual project, like you were doing it at work. You know, if like when I talk to the guys who do podcasting, you know, we basically make sure we have a certain day and a certain time that we meet so we can, you know, do a podcast and go from there and keep that consistency and that rhythm. So I really think it is comes down to consistency, really like